Good afternoon, everybody. I feel like it has been quite some time since we had a professional body forum event, meeting, webinar. So we're really pleased to offer today the chance for us to check in, and what a wonderful way to do so when talking about resilience. I mean, we know what kind of year we came out of last year, what kind of year we've had this year, and we just thought the steering committee went through options to share information, to share discussions, and resilience really was something that came out really strongly for us to have a conversation about. So it's really fantastic to have everyone here. I'm so sorry that we can't see you in person, that we can't have an opportunity to network and connect and share a cup of coffee together, unless you've got your coffee on the side. But let's make the most of today's session, and I would really invite you to share comments in the chat, share your questions on the Q&A. If you want to ask a live question, which I really encourage, so start thinking about what that might be, please use the raise hand function and we'll give you the opportunity to ask a live question. But let's face it, you didn't come here today or join the link to listen to me. So I would like to jump straight into our conversation. We're going to have a presentation from our guest speaker. We're going to move into a panel discussion, which he will moderate. We're then going to have some open Q&A and some dialogue. So please, that's the time that I would really invite you, if you want to share some of your own experiences, some of your challenges, some of lessons learned, good stories, that's the time to do it. So please feel welcome to raise your hand so that we can open your mic. And then we're going to do some just general forum updates and housekeeping. And then we're going to close off. At the end of the session, on the closing screen, you will have the opportunity to enter some thoughts on the next topic in a survey link. We'll also send it to you as a follow-up email. So welcome, everybody. And let's jump straight in. It's a great pleasure for us to welcome Michael Davies as our guest speaker today. Michael has been in the world of resilience and business continuity for 17 years. I mean, he really comes with a wealth of experience. He spent time in the IT industry, companies like Dimension Data, Amdahl, computer configurations, the list goes on. He certainly, there's such a depth to his experience. He focuses his talks and presentations on resilience and business continuity management across Africa, various conferences and speaking platforms. And he's also headed the largest independent business continuity supplier in Africa, or BCM supplier in Africa. So we're so pleased to have him with us today. He decided, like some of us have in the past, to step out of the world of corporate life and independently work with associations around business continuity, risk, resilience, and really working with them to build that capability and that resilience. He is no stranger to association and professional body space. He's an honorary fellow of the Business Continuity Institute in London. He's a member of the Institute of Risk Management. He's a member of the Institute of Directors. So he knows what it means to be a professional body member and to work with professional associations. He's also had so many accolades, too many to list, so I'll perhaps just share that he's had the Business Continuity Institute Industry Personality for Africa. And also he was awarded Business Continuity Institute's Continuity and Resilience Contributor for Africa Award in September last year. So Michael, I think we are so honored to have you with us today. If I could ask you to put on your microphone and your video, I'm going to hand over to you. Everyone, you're in great company. Michael, thank you so much for making the time out of your really busy schedule and spending it with us in the association space. I think it's close to your heart as you are a member of so many. So I'm going to hand straight over to you.
Great, thank you very much, Angela. thank you for the very kind words of introduction there. And hopefully I can impart some useful information to everyone attending today. I'm going to share my screen and just get the presentation going. All right, so from my side is, for almost 2 decades now, is that I've been an evangelist for business continuity and resilience, and talking to organizations and individuals just in terms of how do we become more resilient. So it was a great opportunity for me today to discuss with you how do we prepare for the next what if, and specifically around creating resilient and relevant professional bodies and associations. So today what I would like to do is discuss the current what if that we live in, then the impact on professional bodies and associations. How do we go about building resilience into those professional bodies and associations? And where do we think our next what if will come from? And lastly, and I think most importantly, is what can you take home from your what if toolbox? So let's jump into our current what if, and obviously the pandemic is something that everyone knows very well at this point in time. And yes?
I don't see your screen.
Oh dear. I shall quickly go out of it. It says that it is presenting. Share.
Yes, we see it now. If you could just put it in slideshow mode.
And how is that?
Perfect. We see your first slide. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Angela. Apologies for the slight technical glitch, and it's all part and parcel of our presentations in the new world, the brave new world that we operate in. So thanks. So just getting into the discussion, just a quick repeat. It's, where are we today? What is the impact on professional bodies and associations? How do we build resilience into these associations? Let's talk about possible sources of where do we think the next what if will come from? And then importantly, what do you have to take home in terms of building your resilience for the future? So the current what if being the pandemic, and we can argue all day long around, is it a black swan? What kind of what if is this? In 2019, and the World Economic Forum Global Risk Report comes out quite early in each year. And in 2019, there was a whole chapter around pandemics, around the increased infectious diseases. And they were saying then, prior to the COVID virus having been identified, is that they were predicting a pandemic. Now, obviously, the impact in terms of the scale of it was not considered in that report, but it was already a prediction, and they were not alone in the prediction of a pandemic. So lots of great minds were thinking a lot, but quite often the what ifs are hidden amongst other risks at the time. And it's not seen in isolation, it's seen with a whole bunch of other risks. But importantly, I think two telling statements out of the World Economic Forum Risk Report in 2019 was spending on disaster recovery is almost 9 times higher than on prevention. Again, prevention is better than cure. So if you understand the scale of the current pandemic, you can imagine just what the real cost is to it. And another very telling statement in that report was a statement. It was, is the world sleepwalking into a crisis? Global risks are intensifying, but the collective will to tackle them appears to be lacking. And that's a very concerning statement, particularly in the line of field that I operate in, is people should be aware of building resilience. People should be aware of risks and how it supports so many other things in the organization and associations. So the pandemic that we're in should not have come as a huge surprise, but the scale of it most definitely was surprising. So dealing with the current what if, the consequences of the COVID pandemic, we're all well aware of the dire financial situations globally in terms of many countries being in recessionary economies. The increase in unemployment. Unfortunately, in South Africa, the unemployment is staggering. It's 34% in the formal sector. Take the people who've stopped looking, takes up to 50% and up to 74% unemployment when we look at the youth combined. So really bad statistics hampering any form of growth for the countries. But we're not alone. And each country will have its own measure of how bad it is. But the dire financial situations in terms of economies have been felt globally. It's not to say there aren't opportunities. And before I come across as a prophet of doom and gloom, there are definitely still opportunities, but it's inbuilt in that resilience to get them. Some other consequences is social discontent, just in terms of unhappiness, and even more importantly, more recently, is the COVID fatigue. You can see people are very unhappy about a number of things. We've been in lockdown for 528 days. Now, it's quite difficult to believe. 528 days we've been in lockdown. So we'll be going for 2 years soon, or being in lockdown. And our current lockdown is quite hard to compare to the initial lockdown in level 5, where only essential services were allowed to operate. So we do have a much freer economy and ability to movement, but we're still in a lockdown at the moment. Civil unrest. For years, South Africa has experienced various forms of civil unrest, but a very extreme form was experienced in KwaZulu-Natal and in Gauteng quite recently. And unfortunately, as we continue, there's no clear indicator saying that it's a once-off. And from an organizational perspective is supply chain failure. With a global pandemic and restrictions on movement, there's been quite a few issues in supply. So these are issues we're dealing with currently. And sometimes we ask, well, why are we dealing with these issues? Well, quite clearly, we were not ready. The COVID virus had been identified in December 2019 in Wuhan, China, moved at pace through North Africa and Northern Europe, and then to the west, before getting into Africa and Southern Africa. But we were very definitely not ready, and some of the issues at hand. And it's slightly disappointing given that we had approximately 3 months while the Northern Hemisphere went through the actions of having the pandemics spread. And lessons learned, we in South Africa, we lacked comprehensive, relevant plans in time. So it was the slow turnaround to put things in place. And digital transformation was key to success or failure. As CEO of Continuity SA at the time, we were helping clients into March, just as we were going into a severe lockdown, March, April, May. And we did find that organizations that had gone through quite a good digital transformation were in a much better place than those who had not. And funnily enough, is even those that had gone through a digital transformation and were rolling out their plans, is coming back to supply chain as being an issue at the time of the pandemic. Supply chain is, I know of several organizations that had placed orders for hundreds of laptops in order to get the employees working from home. And due to the pandemic, restriction of travel, supply chain issues, we had a very slow turnaround in things like that. But digital transformation was key for anyone, individuals working from home, for associations and reaching membership, and organizations reaching clients. Initially, with the pandemic setting in, there was a bit of uncertainty and fear, which a year and a half later, we're now where volatility and a bit of fatigue is also setting. And then obviously from a work from home, and it was rushed to get people working from home, the element of cyber risk, which has always been a risk, was exacerbated just because everybody rushing into it and having networks and connectivity that was slightly vulnerable. So those were prime issues around being not ready for the pandemic. In terms of impact to professional bodies and institutes, obviously with all of the things I've just discussed, is member retention is going to be difficult. Revenue stability of associations, whether it be connected with membership or events that no longer having physical events, became an issue. Staying connected with members just through electronic and digital means. There's that shift. We used to have meetings to go to physically, and we're no longer allowed those. So staying connected with members was a bit of a challenge. Inability to attract good resources, another challenge. And then more recently, flight of talent and membership, where we have another wave of immigration at the moment. So as a result of the current what if pandemic, these are issues. And these will be issues going into the next what if. So if we look at the next what if, how are we going to prepare ourselves for the next what if? Now, what do we need to do as professional bodies and associations? So Simon Sinek is quite famous for his books on why. The why is an organization that exists, find your why. And it's time like this that it's quite important to come back to why does the association exist? And if we look at some of the key elements of why associations, why professional bodies get together, firstly, there's the networking and belonging of groups. People of similar minds, similar backgrounds, similar training. They have this human need for belonging and networking. Another reason for associations is training. People join associations so that they can get certified training, they can get formal training, and informal. So through mentoring and professional development, another reason why associations exist. Opportunities for thought leadership is having meetings to discuss things that might be slightly out of tangent, but could be revolutionary to that association and that industry. Another is providing subject matter expertise, particularly for the associations related to qualifications, is there must be subject matter expertise within those associations. As an individual, career planning is important. So, for example, with the Business Continuity Institute, you can join as an associate of the institute, go through as a member, and eventually you may, depending on what you do and what your career is, may end up as a fellow member of that institute. So for individuals belonging to associations, there's a great deal of importance on career planning. Another human need is that of recognition, and industry associations, professional bodies do tend to have awards and recognition evenings, which is great. And then standardization. Within industries, you don't want different elements going off in different directions. I always think of a clip for people swimming different kinds of strokes, just not pulling in the same direction. So it's good to have some form of standardization through industries, and this can be delivered through professional bodies and associations. In terms of opportunities for associations, it's important at this time to consider your relevance, your value and timely delivery of services to the membership, and particularly now, how has it changed through the pandemic? And if we look at opportunities for associations, is to now consider is the current strategy aligned to work from home membership base? It may have potential to cut costs. Is it necessary to have offices? And this is not only true of associations, but organizations as a whole. I know, speaking to many of our clients in the last year and a half, they've had a tremendous rethink on what they need in terms of office space and how the offices of the future will look. From our association side, is given the change, is we need to look for new ways to serve members, tied in with the opportunity of a younger generation coming through, your millennials and younger, the way they consume information and knowledge and the way they consume things is different to an older set. So the strategy should be aligned to that. Another obvious one is improve and increase your digital transformation and online services. Some of the institutions have done fantastic jobs of changing what used to be physical meetings and events into online webinars, online training, and online conferences, and have done it really well. And in fact, in some cases, this has broadened the membership base because they can get to areas where they couldn't have previously. Another opportunity to pounce on is frequent communication and delivered by technology. It's definitely possible to have slightly less formal communication at times, formal when it's required. But in all of this, in the digital transformation, in having online events, we also need to be aware of the virtual meeting fatigue. A lot of colleagues I speak to talk of all this time that they spend in online and just the fatigue. And then another opportunity to look for is regular feedback from members, because they should be telling you where things should be going. And obviously then advancement of profession, as we've spoken in as to the why of the association. So these are strategic opportunities for associations at the moment. So where does the resilience come into this? So building resilience supports and integrates with strategy. And in terms of technology, it needs to be resilient. In terms of the strategy going forward, it needs to be resilient. So if we look at some of the trademark models of strategy in the past and then sometimes used at the moment, is the PESTLE and SWOT. So your PESTLE dealing with political, economical, social, technology, legal, environment, and your SWOT with strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Is resilience plays in all of that. If you just go through the parts of it, the political, the economy, the social, there's an element of risk within each of those, which needs to be supported by some good continuity, some good resilience in supporting your strategy. Furthermore, in terms of the resilience supporting strategy is we live in quite a complex world. We've got to consider things like complexity theory, where in determining your resilience and determining your strategy, there are certain known knowns, things you know for certain, known unknowns, things you know about, but don't know for certain what the outcome will be, and then just certain unknown unknowns. And you've got to understand and identify these as to how they impact on your way forward. Furthermore, there's also chaos theory, just to make it more complicated. That's the theory of butterfly flapping its wings halfway around the world, and there's a tsunami on the other side. Just that whole ripple effect. And as another example is the incarceration of former President Zuma. I'm not sure that people understood the ramifications, or had they really understood the risks attached to it, the outcomes would have been much different. So going back to that chaos theory, where maybe an insignificant event triggers quite an extreme and most significant event. So we've got to consider some of these rationalities as well. And then we're in a world of accelerating change. To give you an example of that, the telephone took 75 years to get to 50 million users. Radio took 38 years to get to 50 million users. TV took 13 years to get to 50 million users. The internet only 4 years, Facebook 2 years, and YouTube had 50 million users within 10 minutes. And it's that accelerating change in the world and global connectedness that adds a bit more complexity to the world we live in. So what are we going to do about it? So I love this phrase is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I love it because it talks about the collaboration that's required in the world today. In the last 6 months, I don't think I've ever heard as much of resilient organizations, resilient communities, resilient individuals, and resilient countries as I have had ever before. And implicit in these phrases is this collaboration and interdependence. So interdependence of countries upon each other. Again, there's lots of debate and back and forth on vaccines through different countries and who's supporting who. But there's a collaboration and there's an interdependence. There's the same relationship in public and private sector and professional bodies and associations within themselves, and also then into their membership base, as well as into the public and private world. And then obviously there's been quite a lot of resilience said about individuals where people have stood up and assisted each other in the last 6 months and more. But from a resilience perspective, you must have a plan. You always have to have a plan. And the plan should be accurate, up to date. It should be relevant to the times. A plan on resilience or business continuity that you used 2 years ago, you have no use for now. It's no longer relevant or in the major part of it. It also needs to be tested and rehearsed. A lot of clients over the years that I know of have had great plans, but haven't tested or rehearsed. And certain key members have left the organization, certain key functions have changed, and it hasn't been rehearsed or tested for a while. And when they really need it, it's lacking. Awareness through the general organization association is also important. And fundamentally, that it integrates with strategy. Your resilience should support and integrate with strategy. And obviously, it's incomplete without technology. The use of virtual meetings, cyber resilience is key on digital transformation. So consider your use of technology through resilience and in support of your strategy going forward. So some of these next what ifs, I'm going to run through a global context and also local. And from a global perspective, just referring to the World Economic Forum is by likelihood. So that's not the impact it's going to have on the world and people, but just by, this is quite likely to happen. Number one is extreme weather. And right now, United States, the Eastern Seaboard knows quite a lot about it due to Hurricane Heidi that's come through. We've got climate action, human environmental, infectious diseases. So yes, well aware of that. And interestingly then, by impact. So this risk by impact is number one on the World Economic Forum, the infectious diseases. So you can see from a quick glance at it, quite obviously has a global context to it, just as does the BCI Horizon Scan. Quite interesting is, I've set it slightly differently, where is the cause of most major disruptions recently in the last 12 months. And then we also have the risk and threat assessments going forward. But the non-occupational disease being pandemic is very high in it. But then it does list climate change, extreme weather, cyber attacks, things that we do need to consider going forward. The one I'd like to spend a little bit more time on, it's the relevance in a South African context, is the IMSA risk report 2021 brought out earlier this year. And it speaks to the local conditions that we are experiencing at the moment. So number one, scarcity of unified ethical and visionary leadership, continuing private and public government's failure to root out and or curb deeply entrenched corruption, shifts in consumer behavior, failure to move forward in reforming the national health system, deepening structural inequality, failure to recalibrate education, extreme weather events, and youth under increasing pressure. And this is what we've seen coming through more recently. Disruptive technologies, cyber risk, and then the prolonged economic recession and or economic collapse. This is a great board to look at if you're considering your next what ifs and causes and effects. And going back to the chaos theory and in terms of the ripple, you might think that these do not have a direct impact, and you may be right in that. But what is the indirect impact on your association? So that's to bring in to mind some of the risks seen ahead. So in terms of what to do about it, I highly recommend scenario planning, where you take key management, take staff, appropriate staff, and look at scenario planning. And I've just listed a couple just to get the mind thinking. You know, fourth wave, there's been a fourth wave that's been predicted for December, water crises, more violence and unrest. There's the municipal elections coming up, and already there's quite heated debates about that. The continued unemployment, climate change and weather disasters. We do have weather disasters in South Africa, supply chain disruption and how it impacts people. And obviously the cyber breach failure, which always raises head in these scenario plans. So take one or two, take something that's relevant to yourself, and go do the scenario planning around it as to what would your association do, and what's that ripple through? You know, what are the effects? Just a quick note as well is that normal disasters continue during exceptional times, and we found that now having run 528 days in lockdown and been in a pandemic for quite some time, is initially organizations forgot about all the other disasters, but other things are happening that affect you at this time as well. So fire, floods, strike or labor action will affect you as well. So consider the ongoing risks too. So to take away with you and put in the toolbox, quite simply, is ensure that you have a plan. Ensure the plan is tested. Make sure that you have the right people together, because no single plan for a single incident is going to get you through a long time. It's important that you have a plan, that your team is agile and can use it in many instances. And then we have quite a few different scenarios where we have an incident, but it isn't really as it was thought to be. So have agile teams, and also have that resilience integrated into what your strategies are. So the integration thereof. Collaboration is just so important in this day and age. And that speaks of other associations with individuals, with countries, with the public sector, with private sector. Just so important that people are working together. The communication within and externally, very important. And so scenario planning is underrated, but really comes in with a huge amount of help if you have done scenario planning and you've rehearsed and tested your plans. So the last thing I'd like to leave you with, just in terms of building your resilience, my phrase of the day from a former US president many years ago, and his statement was, if I had 9 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend the first 6 sharpening my axe. I love it. It tells you that design and plan and then execute. Don't rush into any emergency, any disaster without a plan. And obviously you can't just make up a plan. Is have a good plan to take it through. So that was a very quick run through of building resilience for professional bodies and associations. If anybody would like more detailed information, would like assistance in some of their thoughts, please feel free to contact me. My numbers on the screen. My email is also on the screen. And I'd be happy to have a bit more of a detailed conversation. 30 minutes doesn't do justice to the we've got to get through. So thank you very much. Thank you for your time today. And Angela, I'm not sure, I wouldn't have seen any questions. If there are any questions that have been raised.
Yes, thanks, Michael, and thanks for sharing. I do recognize, we haven't planned for a whole in-depth session, but we're really hoping that these forum events and discussions just trigger people's thinking in a certain direction or trigger a curiosity to find out more. And I think you've certainly done that. There is a question on the Q&A, and it's from an anonymous attendee, and they just say, to what extent should association strategies be changed to cater for the work from home changes we've seen, given that a return to normal might come, or at least it's highly anticipated from members? Because I think members are really missing out on the physical networking benefits that they get from an association. So how should association strategies really be changing in this regard? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Yes, thanks, Angela. I think it's a great question, because everyone is talking about this new normal, but nobody knows what it is. So in line with that, and humans do require physical presence at times. So people do want to get back into offices. People do want to see people at association events. What some institutes and associations have done extremely well is that they've done hybrids. Hybrids where people can physically attend within the current COVID regulations, and also then streamed it where people can still participate electronically as well. So this gives you the best of both worlds, because you can still reach people who couldn't physically, from a geographic perspective, get to meetings and like that. So I think out of this, we're going to come out better than we were before. And I think this is going back to those opportunities, is the associations should be looking at the opportunities to make themselves better than they were before. I hope that answers some of the
I think so.
I see the comment.
Yeah.
Sorry, I see the comment is, but carries significant cost.
Yeah.
A different email. And again, very, very good comment. But you're going to have to look at the whole business model. And so this is the opportunity to relook at everything. One of my previous slides said, look at cutting costs. So do you need the offices to be as big a space as they used to be? So yes, certain elements are going to carry more cost, but you should be looking at other areas that carry less cost as well, that you can take forward. But point given, or point taken, is that in certain these hybrid models, it is going to cost a bit more. But again, the positive side is a greater audience.
Yeah, and I suppose the opportunity to reach outlying regions and areas that wouldn't necessarily make the travel to come into the major city centres where many associations are based. So I agree, there certainly are opportunities, and maybe that's a nice way for us to segue into the panel discussion. So I'm going to just ask that our panelists just unmute their microphones and turn on their videos. And I'm going to hand back to you, Michael, as the session moderator. And thank you for offering to do that. Very much appreciated, and we're looking forward to it. Thank you.
Angela, if I may ask one question, just in terms of timing, I know it's 2:45. The session was to run to 3 o'clock. I seem to have just taken up a bit more time than I should have. Are you happy to run until 3:10?
We're quite flexible, Michael. So if there's good discussion, I'm even happy to go past that. I think we really want to get the thoughts and experiences, so I wouldn't want us to stop that discussion. So please just feel comfortable and use what time you need.
Okay,
as the
you'll
session
give me a
flows.
red card when it's time to go.
I'll do that.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Well, then it's without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to then introduce our panelists. If I can ask them to, look, there they come. Robin, let's see, Vakeshni and Julius have joined us. So while Riani has joined us as well. Thank you very much. So if I may just introduce our panel first off. And while I'm sure most people know everybody on the panel, I'll just do a quick introduction for those who don't. So starting with Vakeshni Vandar, is Executive of Governance and Corporate Services at the Institute of Directors in Southern Africa. Vakeshni's role at the IODSA includes providing governance and legal specialist advice, drafting various thought leadership publications, overseeing research projects, playing an advocacy role on behalf of its members, and overseeing governance and advisory services, board appraisal services, and in-house director development departments. And Vakeshni is also involved with a number of working groups and a guest lecturer at UJ. So welcome, Vakeshni. Thank you for joining us. Then just moving on to Riani Potgieter. She is the CEO at the Compliance Institute of Southern Africa and has vast experience in governance, compliance, risk management, internal audit management, financial risk management, and managerial finance. So that's quite a wide range. And I see has also spent quite a bit of time in the banking sector. So welcome to Riani. Thank you for joining us. And last but not least, our last panelist, Julius Ojapela. Julius is the CEO at the Institute of Internal Auditors South Africa, chairperson of the Public Sector Audit Committee Forum, chairperson of the Anti-Intimidation and Ethical Practices Forum. And Julius is a business and thought leader, a motivational speaker, seasoned training facilitator in the areas of governance, reporting, and assurance. And I know Julius spends a lot of time with nonprofits assisting as well. So thank you, Julius. Welcome on board as well. Thank you very much. So we're in good hands because we have very experienced and qualified people helping us today. What I would like to do is just start with a question, and Vakeshni, if I could ask you to start with the answer, and I'll run it through the other panelists as well, where they have slightly unique or different experiences or views. But we've spent 528 days in lockdown. We've been through a pandemic, now a year and a half deep into it. There have been certain opportunities and challenges. Just from your perspective, is maybe you could talk about some of the, or really answer what were the unique challenges and maybe some of the opportunities that you saw in the last 18 months.
Sure, thanks, Michael. I just apologize for a bit of a groggy voice. I may drink some water in between. So from our perspective, if I look at from a challenges perspective, one of the things I think that helped us be agile and resilient is we kind of already had a lot of planning and thinking around digital transformation already in place before the pandemic kind of started. So that kind of helped us to move much quicker, I think, from that perspective. The challenges that I would say, I think are the same challenges that would be going forward is, and you mentioned it as well in your presentation, is around the member engagement. It was trying to keep that networking and engagement, even though we moved into a digital space. It was resources. We've had quite a few vacancies over the last year, and being a professional body, not necessarily always having the budget to get the unicorns that we generally need, because we need people to fill various roles and do things independently as well, from a BE perspective, the cost there. So that remains a challenge for us, as well as, I think, keeping the well-being and the upliftment from our own individual teams, having gone from a working in home environment and the teams no longer being at office. You know, that social upliftment kind of also left. So finding ways to get that going. So those were probably the key challenges from our side. From an opportunity perspective, We embrace the digital aspect of training and webinars because we saw it as a means of getting a wider reach of our members. It was an opportunity to now actually very quickly put in things that we had in our minds that we wanted to do, which we actually spent too long trying to get the best possible solution or be 100% prepared. But now it kind of forced us to actually roll it out, test it, and develop as we kind of went along. So I think that was a great opportunity the pandemic gave us.
Excellent, thank you. A nice comprehensive answer, and something that quite often doesn't quite get the headline it should is the mental wellness of our employees. And we talk about upliftment, but I think also support for our staff in work from home environments. So fantastic, that's great response there, thank you. Riani, if I may ask you the same question in terms of challenges and opportunities that you've seen?
I think what one can say in the professional body space, we probably all experienced 90% of the same issues. The one thing that I really thought was, and in addition to everything that you've said, Vakeshni, the one thing that I really realized, what was brought home to me during the pandemic, was as much as one talks about we have competitors out there, even though we are a professional body and we're sort of very bespoke in what we do and the training that we offer, there are other players in the market and they've always been there. But what happened for me, and that was an explosion and a proliferation of training providers. Whereas before we would very much look at what's happening locally, you were quite forced now to see that it doesn't matter where you are in the world, it doesn't matter where you, either as a member or a provider, those borders have just disappeared into thin air. So all of a sudden, whereas before you knew your competitors very well, you sort of have a very good feel for the current market conditions and so on. There were people that came into our space that was, we didn't know them before. So that was something that really popped up for me. But I think the good thing that came from that is that the complacency, as much as you never were complacent before, couldn't be, has really been a focus area to say, how do we really be the best at what we do? How do we really make sure that people will want to do our training as opposed to any of the others, or come to our conference versus any of the other conferences that are offered by world-class players in this market? So I think of everything that stood out for me, that was the one thing. And the other thing that, if speaking about challenges that we struggled with and really had to engage with quite a bit, was pricing. So to go from a completely classroom-based kind of solution to completely virtual, and the impact that has on pricing. And in addition to not, just thinking about pricing, is the retrenchments that happened in our field with our members, budgetary constraints. Companies just cut down on training budgets tremendously. How do you position the pricing correctly in that market? So those were the ones, if I speak about challenges, as I say, there are many others, but these are the two that really stand out for me that I would like to highlight. And then just in terms of Vakeshni, what you said about preparedness, we were in the fortunate position that in January 2020, we had already converted to a digital strategy in terms of our record keeping and engagements. We've already gone over to SharePoint. We've already started to use Teams, much, very limited, but it was already there. And I think that's the question, Michael, that you asked today is, what is that next F? We have to, as professional bodies, be at the cutting edge, thinking about what is going to come next, because sure enough, it is going to come. And you need to be prepared for that. And I think that's, for me, one of the biggest learnings is that pre-thought and pre-planning and doing is, I think, what really helped us to make that seamless transition when lockdown happened at the time.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks, Riani. That's great insight. Just one point on the training, the digital training has become borderless, and you're quite right, is as a trainee, you have so much choice out there, but within that choice, we also have the so-called fly-by-nights, the reputable institutions, and it does get quite difficult being a reputable association competing with those. But what has happened is digital training is definitely a way of the future. Not at the exclusivity of it's not excluding physical, but obviously digital training is the way to go at the moment. And the next what if, that complacency is don't be complacent, is do that scenario planning and think of the next what if. So, Julius, if I may call you into this, and I've given you, unfortunately, the hardest part because we've had two people give great insight. So just on the same question around challenges and opportunities in terms of your institute, any insight, please?
Thanks. And I think, like you say, my co-panelists have already alluded on a lot of the common challenges we had and how they've tackled them in this space. I mean, the way we're more or less at the same level in terms of our ability to respond to some of those things. So some of the things we've done will be very similar to what has been mentioned. Maybe I can focus on what we've learned. And I think some of the things that became a little more apparent than they were before we were hit by this pandemic. And the one is the cost of the unfunded mandates of professional bodies. I think professional bodies actually have got there's an expectation of a wider mandate on professional bodies than the funding that they receive. And you quickly realize when there's a compromise on funds we were supposed to do that, but actually we don't have money coming in specifically for that project. And if you look at things like protecting the public interest, we don't really have money being given to professional bodies to protect the public interest. But it's a general expectation that if you're a member of a professional body, the professional body would take care of you if anything happens, and also protecting members. That's also another unfunded mandate. For us, our members work in very risky areas, and they ask you, in this case, when I'm being threatened, what do I do? When funds are tight, you start asking a lot of questions, and what are we going to do, and all that. And I think the other thing that we more or less has become more apparent is just the challenge with the funding model of a professional body. Then you start looking broadly, the need for us to look at how much we need to just survive. Those questions started being very prevalent in the board meetings. We started calculating how far forward we can go, how many members we need to break even, how many events you need to be able to survive, how much you need to be keeping in reserves. So those discussions, they were being had before, but not at the level at which we're having them now, which is good because if we fix those problems, even post-COVID, they will benefit to the overall structure of the organization. So I think those are some of the things that we've been talking about. And maybe just one other challenge I would highlight, which has been said on the chat as well, was that we have moved to the digital space. We moved a lot of our services on the digital space, but the question is, have the members moved to the digital space? So you also it's a challenge of educating our members. I think somebody raised it on the chat there to say, how do members then follow you? Because sometimes you have a mix of members that might not really be digitally inclined. And therefore, as much as we've quickly moved to delivering our services online, are they receiving them online? Or are they still waiting? They still want to call the office and talk to somebody. We've had a few members, even when we said we are working from home, they'll still pitch at the office and still want to talk to somebody. So yeah, I think those are just some of the things I would highlight in just adding to what my co-panelists have said.
Thanks, Julius. Great points. The ability to connect as well. One of the risks from the World Economic Forum is around digital inequality. And it speaks to the point that you do have a certain number of the population who cannot access computers or cannot connect. And that is a risk. And it's something that needs to be, it's been identified, now needs to be addressed in some way. And unfortunately, it also then sort of leads into that unfunded model. And, when you were talking about the public service that associations do, and all of them do, it sort of leans on that element of collaboration that these not-for-profit associations are doing a lot of great public service. But at which point does collaboration turn into abuse? They're not getting funded for doing this. So how can you go on? And particularly if your membership base is reducing. That's quite a challenge. So I think that's a great one to throw into the scenario planning for future. Get your team together and say, right, this is the next what if is around a financial disaster, because one of those scenarios is continued unemployment and economy in a downward spiral. So it's the reality that could well face us. But great points. So Julius, if I may stay with you and give you the chance to answer first, is how have you found with your staff? How have you found working from home? How have they responded to it? Is everyone now used to working from home? Do people want to come back to an office? Just your thoughts around work from home.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Yeah, that one is still a difficult one. I think it also depends on your staff complement from a demographics point of view, whether it's age, gender, race. All those things affect the preference to go back to the office or not, because there are certain people that have worked their whole life in an office environment, and it may be difficult to really cope within a year in working at home. So we have found that honestly, staff have very reluctantly and in a difficult way work from home, in many instances, and they've done their best. Remember, we literally shut down and left and gone home, and it means there was no preparation for any staff member to actually work from home. You learned you were fixing the plane as it was flying, so it was a very difficult one. You couldn't even troubleshoot and help them and give them case study scenarios of, say, if this happens at home, you do that. And now you also have people that are maybe even renovating at home. Now there's hammers and nails and, noise at the background, and it really does make staff members uncomfortable. But I feel like for us working from home, really that was one of the challenges. And also equipment. Some of our equipment were designed to work at the office, connected to the network and all. And now you have this big investment that you have to make that duplicates the resource already at the office, because now staff members are working from home. So I think that also did take a big strain on staff, and also being the staff just family getting sick. I think that has really been a big one, where staff members couldn't work for most of the days, because this is a work from home that's different, because it's a work from home with a lot of psychological pressures. If we were just not allowed to be at the office and work from home and everything else was still normal, I think it would be different. But you are dealing with two problems at the same time. So I think that for us, the bigger challenge would probably have been an investment in work from home equipment. A lot of, we still had old equipment. A lot of people were on desktops, not on laptops necessarily. They didn't need them. They came to the office, worked, and went home. Now you need laptops, because if power goes out when you're at home, you must move to the next mall where you can't carry that desktop to the next shopping center. So yeah, I think that would be my input on some of those challenges with remote working. And we've had to invest a lot in cloud collaboration software so that it's easy for members to share files online.
Excellent, thank you. I love the phrase of fixing the plane while it's flying. It did feel like that going through the pandemic. Ronnie, if I could bring you in, I think you did speak of the digital transformation you had in place. So it sounds like you were quite ahead of the game. So maybe just some of your thoughts on work from home.
Yeah, I think to Julius's point, so there are various aspects to this. And so the technology is one of those aspects. And luckily we were geared for it, when it happened. Other than, data and connectivity issues and so on, I think that those happen all over anyway. But I think the biggest thing that I see in our team certainly is its personality and personal circumstance. So one of our members got married, as an example, somewhere during when there wasn't that much lockdown anymore, and they could get married, and then it was lockdown again. So she got married and she moved to a different province. So now all of a sudden to say, guys, let's go back to the office twice a week at least, it becomes a logistical nightmare for her, as an example. And then, do you have small kids? Do you have dogs? I've got dogs that love to bark when I'm on calls. And, so it's personal circumstances and personality traits. And some people just work better in close proximity. Others absolutely shine when they're on their own, and they don't have to interact, so they're introverts and that. So I think those are the sort of other factors that one needs to take into account when you talk about working from home. But by and large, I would say it worked for us. Thank heavens for that. But I must say we do look forward to coming back to the office more regularly, seeing our members again face to face. I do believe that there will be a space for that in the future. That some of our members have said, we love what you've done with the conference. Don't ever go back to physical. And some of our other members have said, please, can you have a physical conference again? So I think the future of conferencing is probably a hybrid for the very near future. Who knows? In the further future, it's probably going to be something like these Samsung devices, and we'll all be in together in the same virtual room kind of thing.
Excellent, thanks. So we'll all join together in virtual reality in future.
I think that's on the cards. I really think so.
Excellent.
I don't think, the viruses are not going to go. They're going to increase. As climate change happens, more viruses are going to be released into our atmosphere, and it's just going to become worse and worse. And we're going to find solutions for that. But yeah, that's just sort of not a doomsday prophet, but I do think just being realistic about these things.
So one thing I'm delighted to say is that the human race are very resilient, and we always seem to make a plan, and we always move forward. Yeah. So you're quite right. We have numerous challenges ahead of us, but the great thing is we're very resilient. We'll make a plan. Vikeshni, from your side, working from home, how did it go with staff and yourself?
Thanks. I echo Riani's comments there as well. We were already moving away from desktop, and we always kept at least 3 or 4 spare laptops anywhere roving. So we were able to give those who didn't laptops to kind of go in. The challenges was more, I think, in terms of local infrastructure. So although we got rain cards to give everyone connectivity who didn't have Wi-Fi at home, the actual network coverage didn't always work for everyone. So then we had to try and get Telkom SIM cards or whatever it is. And that's still, I think, an issue now, and we'll probably still see it, even if we continue with a hybrid of some at the office and some working from home. And then what we did was we actually let staff take their stuff from the office. So people took their second screens, we let them take their UPS systems as well. We added it onto our insurance plan so that it was insured, so that we could just kind of cater for the Eskom's, no energy supply situation. But even then, I think the productivity during those times was also a challenge because people were off. Those UPSs already helped them for an hour or so, and then they were offline for an extra couple of hours. So that was definitely a challenge. What we did then, as soon as it was safe, was the office has been open, but on a maximum 50% capacity, and it's probably never ever got to that. But those who did have issues and couldn't connect could then at least go to the office if there was just one person even there to at least continue working. So we tried to find ways to actually support the staff so that they were still productive. So that, I think that was a challenge there. I think we've got about a 50-50 split as well. I echo the personality traits. You can see some staff definitely want to go back because of the social element, because of the kids, because of those things. And there's some of us, like with my team specifically, where I think we're so comfortable. I'm so comfortable from working from home. I can't see myself going back to the office. But I think we will definitely start doing a rotation where you get teams back in, at least if it's once or twice a week. There is that need to have that social kind of interaction and planning and getting together. And what we did with our staff meetings was we tried to have themed staff meetings, playing music, sending stuff to staff via delivery, just to kind of keep the atmosphere going as if they were still at the office. So I think that was some of the stuff that we did. And from a member perspective, I think in the beginning, quite a bit of resistance from members to go onto the digital training platform. A lot of members said, no, we're going to wait till you get back to face-to-face. But over time, and if you had to ask members now, I think they've all changed, a lot of them, to say they actually prefer the digital space. But I agree, we're a network organization. Face-to-face is definitely going to come back, especially for the in-house training in terms of value and the networking opportunities there.
Excellent, thank you. And while you were talking, one of the comments that did come up was about webinar fatigue, and that that is a risk, and it is something in the hybrid future that all associations are going to have to take into account. Is you've got to give good value, encourage people to attend your webinars. Otherwise, they won't, because there's hundreds of other webinars to go to. Kerstin, thanks as well for talking about members, because that's where I wanted to go into as well. And if you don't mind, I'll move to Riani, just in terms of members, how members take into the work from home, the digital process, and maybe where do you think they're expecting things to go?
There was definitely an impact, obviously. So what we've seen with our members, we've been in the compliance industry, and our members are compliance officers. Julius, they do follow quite a bit of a risk-based approach, and they make use of internal audit methodologies when we do compliance monitoring, as an example. Well, that was one of the most impacted areas for them, where, as before, you would go out and do physical site visits, physical audits, monitoring, and so on. We saw a great big shift to remote monitoring, and even from the regulators' side. Regulators were very much constrained before, in terms of, we've got this team of inspectors, they can go to these sites and you can cover, let's say, 10 a year kind of thing. Now they can do anywhere in the world where they have to be, they can actually do those remote inspections and monitoring. So that was quite a big impact on our fraternity as compliance officers. What they saw through all of this, of course, is that it is just so much more efficient. So it is something that I think is going to continue in our fraternity. And of course, where does that leave us as a professional body? So we will have to adjust our training and our methodologies and all of that accordingly. So we can't be still quoting from the old hymn book, so to speak. And our membership has moved on to some completely different space. The other thing that we saw with our compliance officers, whereas before they were sort of a grudge purchase and only brought into meetings if and when really required, with the disaster management regulations having changed, if you remember back to 2020, in those early days of lockdown, and actually for that whole year, the regulations were just coming thick and fast. Stupid as some of them might have been. You can't wear sandals with a jersey. You can't buy those. Remember those regulations. But the fact is they were there. So what we saw was our compliance officers were much more brought to the foreground in business. They were also pulled into business continuity meetings, Michael, much more than before. So that was typically not a domain that compliance would be involved in. All of a sudden, occupational health and safety, business continuity, and all of that became much more of a focus area for our compliance officers. And again, that impacts on the offerings that we give to our members as a professional body. We have to adjust or die. We comply or die.
Comply or die.
Yeah. I'm not allowed to say that. I actually want to have T-shirts with that logo on, and my team is just saying, no, you can't do that.
It's quite funny you mentioned the early days of lockdown. That feels like it was so long ago, but it's something that's going to be with us for some time. Thanks, Riani. That was great. Julius, from your side, just in terms of your membership base, how the members have changed to the work from home, how it's affected you as well.
Yeah, no, I think I feel for the member, actually. I still feel for our members, heavily, because especially those working in the public sector. I think the public sector is still behind in terms of infrastructure and protocols, working from home. You can imagine there isn't really much digital files to audit. So it means our members have to develop some hybrid models of doing internal audits, or get the documents and on a certain day, follow COVID protocols and get them audit part of this, and find new ways of verifying people. I've heard of people taking pictures of themselves with IDs and all those things. You can imagine what physical verification is like in this, asset verification is like in this kind of an environment for our members. And I mean, government has got assets all over the place. So yeah, like you're saying, vacation is some of the staff members take items home. Now, instead of getting into one office and inspecting 40 screens, you've got 40 screens in 40 different locations. So it has not become very easy. And now you also have, supervision. Our work is an educational program in its nature. We have ranks, you get in at the lower level, you go up through supervision, and usually it works like that. And it was always easier. A lot of our managers are skilled in direct supervision, face to face. So you can imagine then having a junior internal audit clerk that needs to be supervised. So I think our members went through a lot. And then, like I said, again, in public sector, if you had to, you can imagine the impact of a procurement process when you have to buy a new system to collaborate with your team, how long that takes and the impact of that on the internal audit work plan. So really, it's been a nightmare, and I think our members have really done their best under the circumstances. We've seen this even affecting external auditors in how the Auditor General has adjusted how they've audited. They've had to leave out certain sections of the audit that were like, those were very nice to have, but do we really have to audit that section when it's COVID? We don't have to. So yeah, I think our members have faced a lot of that. There were times where they couldn't even go to the office. And yeah, so I think it's been a difficult one. From our point of view, there's always been that, how do I continue getting value? And I think as professional bodies, obviously our main mandate is community management. It's not trading, it's not certification. We have been given a mandate to deal with the community, whichever way that community goes. And it's a balance now to say, what do we want to do and what does the member need now? And a professional body has been geared to do certain things. But at this point, what is key to the members? And I think that has been the struggle that we've been through, supporting members on member value, but also gearing ourselves to shift to support members in what they want. That might have not been part of the generic offering that we had before. So yeah, I think I feel for our members at this point. They've been through a lot, and I'm hoping that we are adjusting ourselves as fast as we can to cater for their needs in this time.
Thanks, Julius. And I'm going to ask one more question of everyone. And I think because you're talking about the members and the insights you've given us just around the members, I enjoyed that direct supervision. These associations, organizations have that problem. Also have a challenge in creating culture. If you have a workforce, I know some people have been employed and have worked remotely from day one. How do you disseminate a culture, whether it's an association culture or a organizational culture, if people never see each other? It's quite a challenge. So the question to you is really then forging ahead into this brave new world, and specifically around membership. What would you change, or what would you recommend to change to improve it for your membership going forward? And if I may start with you, Julius.
Yeah, I think what to change really, it's one thing like I said, I think for me is the community management model that we have, which is more or less the funding model. I think we need to go back to the basics in terms of I think there are three things you need to run a profession. You need things, items, money, and all that. You need people and you need partnerships. And I think Rian has talked about that professional bodies are actually more collaborative. There is very little competition amongst professional bodies. There is actually a lot of spaces for us to cooperate together. And I think this has really helped because you had a duplication of same events amongst professional bodies. So it just shows that there's actually a lot of room for us to collaborate. And a lot of our members hold more than one membership. Very few members have a membership just of the IIA. They would have a membership of the IIA, SAICA, IODSA. And so I think if there's one thing that definitely we can change is amongst ourselves as professional bodies, being able to clearly share the market and collaborate so that we don't create too much duplication for the member. Like that webinar fatigue would be reduced a little if we're able to have one big event that all professional bodies just promoted to their member and then boom, we're done. Instead of having 20 protection of personal information events, you usually have one where all members of the profession. Then the next one maybe is better geared at being delivered by another professional, but we all channel our members there instead of all of us actually duplicating there. And that would help with the limited resources that we actually have. So I think one thing we can change is a much better collaboration between professional bodies, especially those where our members are likely to belong to each other's professional bodies.
Yeah. Thanks, Julius. I think a great concept of one big event for a number of professional bodies. And then we'll see whether it's really collaboration or competitors and everyone gets together. But thanks for the comments there. That's great. And Rani, if I can come back to you, if you were given a magic wand to change something going into the future, given learnings from the last 18 months?
Yeah, that's a great point, Julius. I do agree with you on that one. I think for me, as a professional body in the space that we play in, artificial intelligence has just been accelerated. You know, the whole digitalization has just been accelerated. The impact of that on how we as compliance officers operate and what are those new skills that we need in that new world. That is what I wish we could just, you know, if you say magic wand, boom, here are the new courses for next year. We're going to, you know, teach you all about what you need to know about AI and how that impacts compliance. And just getting back to Julius's point, I think especially in the kind of GRC, the governance, risk and compliance space, that is going to be one of the key impacts. And the roles are going to integrate much more. So because the same things that we look at from those different angles, it remains the same information, you know. So I think there's got to be that collaboration as well. Understanding how we can help each other with new methodologies, new approaches, and so on, for our membership and for our communities.
You're on mute, Michael.
Mute, Michael.
No, sorry. Apologies. So great concept and using technology for good. So someone had to get the you're on mute. So Vikeshni, last comment really then, just around membership, what would you change?
So if we had the magic wand, I think from a outside looking professional body perspective, given the whole governance and corruption and all of the things that people tend to look to the IOD for, it would be that every director would be a member, because then they actually fall within our code of conduct that we could actually do something. So from an outside perspective, that inwards, I think from a future perspective for members, it's just continuing the road of making the ease of access to things better. Looking at the future generation, people want that instant gratification, that instant access. It's just continuously looking at ways of how we do that for our members.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And so Vikeshni, Rani, and Julius, thank you very much for your time today. Some really great insight, and I think it resonates with some of the issues I spoke of earlier. So it's really great to have all these great minds sharing thoughts. So thank you very much. Angela, over to you.
Thanks so much, and don't go anywhere, panel, because there are some questions that are coming up on the Q&A. I'm going to pose them, but I'm also going to again encourage anyone in the audience, if you want to add to your question or add a comment or answer one of the questions, give your perspective, please just use the raise hand button, which is at the bottom of your Zoom webinar screen under the controls, and we will invite you into the conversation. But so perhaps, and I won't target anyone in particular, maybe just a perspective from all of you is, and this is from Jill. She says, are your members expecting more guidance and support from you? And have you seen those expectations rise significantly over the last couple of months or the last year? Who'd like to give it a go? Vikeshni?
Sure, shall I go, Angela? I think from an advisory perspective, I can tell you undoubtedly yes. Our advisory work, surprisingly during this time where you think people's budgets would be a problem, has increased double. So there's definitely organizations, members wanting more advice during this time. And even the member queries have come up wanting more support and guidance.
Okay. Julius, have you seen your members wanting more support?
Yeah, no, I think the level of, because online engagement has increased, you get a little more queries via email, via technical support, but I think it's some of the things they would have done in another way previously. They would have met each other at an event and talked about. So yeah, so I think there has been one more, now the channel, because there's only one channel online, you start seeing a little more online queries. And members don't meet each other anymore. They are not able to ask each other questions.
Yeah.
They used to meet at events and talk to each other and give each other the answers. Now all those answers are being asked from one place, which is us. So yeah, there has been some form of an increase in much more basic questions that members usually would have just talked to each other at the office about. And now they have us to ask those questions.
Riani, are you seeing the same in the compliance space?
Yeah, I wouldn't say we're expecting more advisory work, perhaps, or that expectation coming through, but certainly the kind of queries that we've been getting from our members, much more around the designations, the career path. How do I get ahead? How do I make myself relevant? That from members, but interestingly enough, we also had a definite increase in queries from non-members. I think it's maybe to do with this whole thing that, the emphasis on compliance during the whole COVID-19 pandemic, the lockdowns, etc., all the regulations, definitely an increase in non-members asking about a career in compliance. So that we've definitely seen. As for expectations, I think although it wasn't an express expectation, there was certainly, after we've delivered it, we had a fantastic conference this year with some great providers. May I say who that was?
It's your choice.
So I must say, your hub, thank you, your hub. We had a really, really fantastic conference. And as I say, it wasn't an express need from our members to say, give us a great conference. But the moment it happened, it was like, wow, we want more of this, so that was more our experience, I think.
But maybe, Riani, what a fabulous opportunity that's opening up to you is if non-members are reaching out for advice, for support, for career guidance, they're seeing the relevance of the Institute, and what a fantastic growth opportunity for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, so we have seen that as well on our conference, many more non-members joining this year. And yeah, we also offer, we're part of the International Federation of Compliance Associations, and through that, we have been issuing the International Certified Compliance Professional designation based on our designation holders, and that has, sadly so, I must say, that has really driven a lot of interest as well, because people are immigrating, people are leaving the country, so there's definitely an interest in that international connection as well.
Sure. So here's one, and as a question, and maybe this is also something, Michael, you can share if you've seen any experiences in the clients you've been working with, is the question is, have the panelists experienced challenges with team members that have had COVID or are dealing with the long-term impact of COVID? And I think that's something people are only starting to recognize now after a while, but has anyone experienced changes in your team as a result of them having had COVID?
So, Angela, if I may just share some experience. We've been in the very unfortunate position that some of our employees have passed away due to COVID. Some employees have had COVID and tended to have long COVID. And some of our employees, we've managed, they have comorbidities, haven't had COVID, but we've had to manage it. And I'm sure my experiences felt, as in lots of other organizations have felt it as well. It creates a great deal of fear and uncertainty. And there's still a stigma attached to, if you've had COVID, there still is a stigma attached to it. For what reason I can't quite get to the bottom of. And so there's a different play in terms of people come to the office. Because of the nature of our businesses, we were considered a essential services provider, which meant there were a number of our employees who did come to the office on a daily basis. And while I was back in corporate, I myself, I spent a lot of time with clients, and they were essential service providers. So I was meeting with them, I was meeting with our staff, and there's quite an interesting dynamic. And just as we have the polarized vaxxers and anti-vaxxers, so those who are getting vaccinated and those who aren't, you had this polarized sense towards COVID as well. The sort of more free spirit who said, well, if I'm going to get it, I'm going to get it, to others who said, well, I'm not coming anywhere near the office because I may get it. So it definitely added quite a complexity to management and leadership of people, because people at the best of times sometimes are a bit of a challenge to lead and manage. I once thrown a pandemic and this virus into it was just a little bit more volatile. So some of the things we did is be very clear on communication throughout. Be very clear on the regulations and processes, and we had a number of sites across different countries, and we would be very clear about what processes there were. We used digital for access, so people would digitally book a space in an office, and then accordingly would come in on that. But I think most of all is empathy. Is we all somewhere along the line experience, or have experienced through a friend or family, the disastrous effect of COVID. So empathy is one of the biggest things. So that's from my side, my experience.
Any other comment?
I think, Ange, from our side, especially in this last third wave, we've had quite a few management team members all being sick at the same time. So I think not much challenges with staff themselves, but I think challenges from an organization perspective of capacity, especially when more than one person is sick. We tend to be reliant on one individual for one aspect of a job. So I think a challenge internally, and I think also realization from management and Exco of actually lowering expectations. We are a high performance culture in general, but actually, giving people the leeway to recover and just lowering expectations. I think that's the kind of approach we've taken, and very considerate and letting people kind of start back, as they could.
So maybe that's quite a nice caveat into the next questions, and maybe you saw it on the Q&A, Vikeshni, but with the impact on resources, COVID, the question is, with being unable to increase resources in our association, our board have stopped any growth of employees, and we will need to outsource. Are any of you outsourcing right now? Is it working? This is clearly something this attendee hasn't done before, and maybe is feeling a bit nervous about it. So maybe it's a general commentary about outsourcing. If you have teams that are incapacitated, what do you do? Short term, long term, etc. Any thoughts on outsourcing? And if anyone has tried it, has it worked? Is it something you're going to consider?
Yeah, I can maybe from my side, I've just mentioned, so I think there are certain things that you can definitely outsource, and that's best left to experts. So in 2020 we did our own conference. It went very well, but it takes so much time and energy on a once a year kind of event, where your normal, call it the standard day-to-day stuff, falls behind because of that. So I think one has to decide what you can and will outsource. There are certain functions that I believe you shouldn't outsource it. When you are forced to, obviously, that's a different story. But an outsourcing strategy is a very specific thing that you should say, this I can outsource, this I shouldn't outsource. That's core to the institute, and we need to be able to handle and do that ourselves. But when COVID hits, that's a different story altogether. But those are my thoughts on outsourcing at this point.
I think from our side, Ange, we haven't outsourced services per se, but we've definitely brought in consultants or outsourced assistants when we've got big projects because of capacity and people being spread out. So we've done that plenty of times, and we'll still do that, I think, in future. And that works well if you find a good or the right person to assist.
Julius, I see you got your mic on.
No, I think we've all faced a situation where we have to. I see one of the start of that comment is around the board saying you can't get more people in, and I think for us it was the time to then appreciate our uniqueness as a professional body. Unlike an ordinary business out there where the customers are not also the shareholders, we could tap into the members still to come and capacitate the institute. So I think we are in a privileged situation where actually members want to do things for the institute, and the likes of MTN doesn't have the luxury of me wanting to help them if they've got a problem simply because I'm using their line. So it's one of those things where I feel like the capacitating the people element of the organization, we were then given an opportunity to explore to supplement the resources that we have. And I think one is the first one was just really allowing staff members to do more, and sometimes it's seen as if you get people to do more, it's really straining, but there are staff members that are very multi-skilled and underutilized. If you give them more, they're gonna do more. And then you beef up some of the cracks that fell through. We tapped into things like having interns. So we are hosting interns from colleges that offer admin support to the senior members so they can focus on more strategic thinking and then get all the admin they would have had to do to the interns that come through, and they come at a much better rate, obviously. And we give them an opportunity to finish their studies. They give us the resources we need. It's a really big mutual benefit. And this came at a good time for us where we were elevating the strategy of getting members more involved in the institute. So we have a staff complement of volunteers, basically of 140 people sitting on our committees. And if we give them an opportunity to work, they have developed a lot of content that we would have had to pay a lot of money for somebody to develop, but the members are coming forward and saying, let us get involved in your content development strategy. They interview CAEs, they come up with the content, they write articles. Those are things you would have needed very highly skilled people to do, and members are able to do that. But still, then you still look at the other elements where you do need experts, like Graham said, then you can outsource those elements. So yeah, it was just more an appreciation of all the places where we could get resources before we just go for one element.
So I see a comment from Alan on the chat, and Alan, I'm going to, if you are still with us, ask you if you would like to share some of your thoughts live, if you'd be keen to do so, because I like to put people on the spot. I'm going to open your microphone, and if you would like to share, you said that you've really felt the impacts of team members who contracted COVID and continue with long COVID, and the increase in workload. So we'd really invite you to share some of those thoughts if you would like to.
Yes, thanks, Angela. Similar to what we've seen through our member base, there's been havoc on resourcing and levels of overwork during this period. I think we've all seen it and are experiencing it. And the problem is that even with the best laid out plans, when someone goes down with COVID, it's massive. It has a huge impact. And unless you've got the proper continuity plans in place and they've been well tested, you're fighting just to keep the day-to-day stuff running. And luckily we've a strong team that can pull together, and they've been very good at that. But you sense an environment where it's just heavy workload, and part of the reason why we're still successful, but definitely something that's having an impact and could have a longer term impact given long COVID and similar kind of challenges.
Thanks so much for that. I'm conscious of our time, and I think we don't want anyone to get fatigue on this webinar. So, Michael, I don't know if you want to just round up any closing remarks from the panel.
Thanks, Angela. Just a very quick thing from myself. Thanks, Alan, for the commentary. And yes, I don't know any organisation or any individual who hasn't said that they spend 10 hours a day in front of teams and people are off sick and they're now carrying another load. It is a challenge for everyone. A challenge for everyone to also draw a line in the sand. There was a comment earlier about office hours, and because we work in virtually, is that now people call you at 10 o'clock at night because that's when they're working, and we have seemed to have lost this concept of office hours, and plus the workload is very difficult. So out of it, transfer of skills where somebody is ill with COVID or anything else, the transfer of skills and being able to step into other positions is very, very important. And that's something that any organization should be looking at. And unfortunately, because of the financial situation, everyone's pressed with the minimum amount of staff members, which is quite sad because then things are getting dropped. But having the right staff complement is so important. And I think people need to be quite vocal about the situations where that's not the case. But a great point. Thank you very much. Just in terms of wrapping up, so sort of the question is, what are you going to do? Not when you go home, because you probably, well, not in everyone's case, it just looks like you're in the office, but what are you going to do when you go home? When you get off this call, what are you going to write down and say, I must do this tomorrow? So I'll start with vacation. You go through Riani and end with Julius. So, this is as a panelist, your last chance to give a really insightful piece of commentary. So, Vakesh, what are you going to take away and do tomorrow differently?
That's a tough one. While I think about that, maybe what my advice would be for people is, who's listening in, is to create a culture of pro-innovation. I thought that is key for a resilient organization, because I think we're only resilient as our people, and for them to be agile and adaptable. So I would say a takeaway for me based on that, and the current conversation that we just had now, is ensuring that we don't allow the burnout of these key individuals that we have that's running the organization, that's keeping us resilient and adaptable, and putting more things in place to, I think, prevent that, and being more aware of how we relieve, I think, that stress, especially from working, I think, from home.
Riani, your comment?
My biggest takeaway, honestly, this has been a realization for me. In the midst of war and battles, we get in there and we do what we need to do. And then once it's all gone, we just say, oh, we've done this, and we don't even sometimes say that. The one thing that I've really realized is that we have to give ourselves the recognition for what we've been through and what we've implemented during that process. And not to just gloss over things and say, oh, we've actually converted to SharePoint, everything is now in the cloud. That's a big thing, and we should really report that to our board and to our stakeholders, and just recognize that amidst all of these issues that we've been having, all of these massive changes that we've been going through, the one takeaway for me is pat yourself on the back. Really, I think that's key for me.
Excellent, great recommendation. Thank you very much. That just comes with empathy and love, and that's great. So, Julius, what wise words do you have for us?
Yeah, no. I think from my side, it's just still members first, and we continue to put members at the forefront of whatever we do. And because it's, you can get a lot professional bodies challenges that you've got a lot of members. And as a member, you want to feel like a member individually, irrespective of, there are many others like you. And yeah, we continue as professional bodies to look for ways to give that individualized member experience. And I think that intention on its own is enough to keep us being innovative at the right level, to bridge the gap between the inability to engage face-to-face and us being online, that whatever we do is for the purpose of bringing the member experience that they would expect under normal circumstances. So yeah, I think that for me is the takeaway, and leveraging whatever is available out there to make that possible.
Excellent, thank you, Julia. So, the professional bodies need to remember their why. Why they're there in the first place. So fantastic. So once again, thank you very much. Again, Keshni, Riani, and Julius, thanks for your time. We took a lot of it today, so thanks for all the great insight. And I will pass back to Angela. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And Michael, if I can just say thank you to you for spending the afternoon with us in your busy time, and thank you again from me. I'm just going to do a couple of housekeeping updates. So Michael, you're welcome to stay on the line if you want to hear what's happening. And then I'm going to ask Faith from CIPA just to do a few closing remarks. But before I do that, Faith, if you'll give me just a few minutes to just give everyone a quick update of where we're at and remind people of a few things in terms of the Professional Body Forum. Just a quick update regarding SteerCo. You would have seen in the communication that went out a while back that we have some vacancies on SteerCo, and I've shown you now that the previous SteerCo was made up of 6 people, myself as the voluntary chair, Jerry Gould, Faith Ngwenya, Lelani Bezuidenhout, Gillian Lacordia, and Leseha Mkwena. So we've had a few changes, and we did a call for nominations. Gillian, stepping down as the CEO of IMSA, is stepping down from SteerCo. Fortunately, she'll still be in the background supporting the forum, just from a different perspective, but she won't be representing any of the associations on the SteerCo. And Leseha has joined Faith's team in CIPA, so we just thought it was probably a good idea to have more diverse representation in terms of the number of associations on SteerCo. So Leseha will be a backup or alternate to Faith. We then did the call for nominations. We received 2 nominations. There were 3 seats, so that we still have space for an additional person if anyone wishes to volunteer. But we approached those individuals, and both have very kindly agreed to join SteerCo. So that's Ria Walsh, who is the CEO of the Chartered Institute of Professional Practitioners and Trainers, and Riani, who is one of the panelists today, who is the CEO of Compliance Institute South Africa, will be joining SteerCo in Jill and Leseha's place. So very warm welcome to you, to SteerCo. As you know, we're still a very informal forum, but the SteerCo are volunteers from within the association community that just help us plan the sessions, get some ideas going, consider who we're going to have as speakers, what are our topics of discussion. So really an important role, and we appreciate the volunteer nature of the work that's being done by SteerCo. So thank you to Ria and Riani for accepting their nominations, and we look forward to working with you in the lead up to our next event. So just a few updates on that. I'm going to just talk about next event, the website and email communication. We planned, I actually think we changed the date to the 2nd of December. So it's I think it's the 2nd, which is a Thursday. I will send out some communications closer to the time, but we're going to be having a CEO roundtable. That will be an open conversation amongst the leadership of associations, unpacking some of the challenges that we've been going through and looking at solutions and collaboration specifically. Just a reminder that we do have a website that would encourage you to visit. We keep some news and announcements. We've got some documents. The recording of this webinar will also go into the video library. We also communicate vacancies. We spoke about resourcing challenges. Those of you that are replacing members of your team or growing your team in this time, if you'd like to communicate your vacancies to the forum members, you're welcome to do that as well. Just drop the Secretariat a note. And then just a reminder that we use a bulk mail system called bulk mail, as its name implies. So please, would you just ensure that you white label the sender address, check your spam and junk filters. I know a couple of people reached out to me in the last day or so saying that the communication goes to their junk folder. So you can just save us as safe senders on the email communication. And that's really it from me in terms of some general updates and housekeeping. So Faith, I'm going to hand over to you just to wrap us up for the day. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Angela. There is a question on the chat group as to when will the results of the survey be shared with members. I think we'll discuss that and see if we can probably just distribute the results to the members of the forum. Just from this afternoon's session, I just want to say thank you. It really is, it comes at the right time, because as professional bodies, we sometimes are struggling about the same things, and sometimes it's refreshing when you listen to different people talking about the issues, the challenges that you are facing in your own professional body. And that is the beauty of the IPBF, because that is where we share these, and you kind of realize that, you know what, my organization is not alone. It is true that the COVID and the lockdown and everything that came with the pandemic, it hit us when we were least prepared. And we still are not yet at a level where we would want to be. And really, Michael Davis, thank you so much for it. We really needed 9 hours when you to listen to your insight into how we as associations can actually deal better, and the questions that we need to be asking about our professional bodies. Just takeaways from your presentation, I think it really hits home when we are looking at why are we existing as associations? Why are we here? And what we might have been formed for. SAIPA is now 40 years old. The reason we were formed 40 years ago has definitely evolved over the time. And I think this is the right time for us to reflect as to why we exist as professional bodies, and the relevance to our members, delivery of services that are in line with where our members are. And from the panelists that you had in the panel discussion, we have had quite a few of areas that we as professional bodies can actually be looking into as to how do we then cater for the time that we are in, and also most importantly, the time beyond COVID. We don't know when that period is going to be, but how are we going to deal with that particular time? A lot would have been lost, both from human capacity point of view, and the emotions are no longer the same as we were pre the pandemic. And really, these are the things that will require us to sit again around the table and see what is the life without the pandemic, because we have been so used to living within these conditions, as foreign as it is currently. But it is something that we now need to, even again, to unlearn and relearn the new way of getting back I think it was Vikeshni who was saying that she is definitely not looking forward to going back to the office full time. So it was a hassle when we started the work from home, and we thought, how am I going to survive the dogs and everyone else who will be around me sharing my space when I'm at work? So we have now got used to that to a large extent. And there is a lot that we need to really be looking into to continue. So to the panelists, Vikeshni, Riani, and Julius, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us as to what your professional bodies have actually experienced and been challenged with, and how you are coping with such during this period. And it truly is the time for us to put our forces together. As Michael, when he ended his presentation, the famous quote that really resonates with a lot of us, that if we really want to go fast, yes, you will want to walk by yourself. But if we want to go far, we need each other. So as professional bodies, for us to get far, we definitely need each other. We need to be tapping into each other's knowledge, into each other's resources as far as possible for us to really come out as better professional bodies than we were before. So thank you so much, Angela and Tim. Thank you for always availing yourself and your services to run the IPBF. Without your help, IPBF will obviously not run as smoothly as it is. So to the team at your hub, we really are thanking you. And to everyone else, we wish you well. At least we are in spring, so we have springed into spring very well in IPBF. And I think we are all looking forward to this new season with something that is really going to be pushing our professional bodies and associations forward. So thank you so much. We welcome your presence at this forum and for this webinar, and hope that you have got some takeaways that you will be applying in your own environment. So thank you so much to everyone.